I was on a plane. Do you understand what I am telling you? I was 30,000 feet above the earth, somewhere between Peking and Hanoi, carrying a message of peace, because that is what I was, a man who believed that African hands could stop a war on the other side of the world. And while I was suspended in that sky, while I was looking out at the clouds and thinking of you, they took my country. February 24th, 1966. Write it down. Burn it into the bone of your memory, because that is the day Ghana was murdered in its sleep. I heard it first from a radio broadcast. A radio, not from my generals, not from my cabinet, from a voice I did not recognize, barking out of a little box, telling the world that the National Liberation Council had assumed control of Ghana. The National Liberation Council. You hear those words and they sound like progress, don't they? They sound like freedom. That is the genius of the Americans. They have always known how to dress a corpse in a wedding gown. They say the fighting lasted several hours. They say my presidential guard, young men, boys almost held those gates. They held those gates against armored vehicles, against soldiers who had been told that Nkrumah was a tyrant, that they were liberating Ghana, that history would thank them. My guards died at those gates, and they did not know that I was not even inside. I was in a sky above Asia, carrying peace like a fool, while my children bled on Ghanaian soil. The radio said 5 soldiers were killed. Others say more. The truth, as always, belongs to whoever holds the microphone. What I know is that boys died who should not have died. Boys who believed in something. And that's belief. That is what the coup was really designed to kill. Do you want to know what they did to my statue? The tall one. The one at the entrance to Parliament. The one I had stood beside and felt the whole weight of African possibility press against my chest. They tore it down. They wrapped ropes around my neck, my stone neck, and they pulled. And when it fell, when the head of Osagyefo cracked against the pavement of independence Ghana, there were people who cheered. My own people, cheering. And I do not say this to condemn them. I say it because I understand what propaganda does to a hungry man, what isolation does, what the systematic destruction of hope will eventually produce. They had been working for years before that morning. You understand? The CIA, and I will say those letters plainly because the documents exist now. They have been released. You can read them yourself. The CIA had been cultivating officers inside my own army for years. They called it Operation. They gave it a code name. They gave the dismemberment of my nation a code name and filed it and stamped it and sent cables back to Langley, Virginia, reporting on how soon they could remove Nkrumah. Because I had nationalized industries. Because I was building a unified Africa. Because a strong socialist free Africa was a problem they could not afford. Guinea took me in. Sekou Touré, a man who had once told de Gaulle no, a man who understood what it was to refuse, he opened his arms to me. He made me co-president of Guinea, an honor I did not deserve and could not use, because I was finished. Not dead, finished. There is a difference. Death is clean. What they did to me was leave me breathing with nothing left to breathe for. I wrote books. I kept writing. Dark Days in Ghana, Class Struggle in Africa. I wrote because it was the only territory they could not occupy. But every morning I woke up in Conakry knowing that Accra was there, that the sea was there, that my people were waking up under a government that called itself liberation, and I could not touch it. I could not reach across that water. They ask, did you make mistakes? Yes. But a man who builds roads, schools, hospitals, universities, a man who takes a colonized people and teaches them that their dignity is not something to be granted by London, that man deserves to be removed by his own people through his own constitution, not by soldiers paid in American patience. The thing that breaks me, the thing I turn over in the dark, is not the coup itself. It is what came after. Ghana's economy, the one they said I had destroyed, it collapsed further under the men who replaced me. The cocoa prices fell, the debt grew, the IMF arrived with its conditions and its contempt. And the great irony, the devastating irony, is that everything they accuse me of mismanaging became infinitely worse in the hands of my so-called liberators. And there was no statue left to pull down. There was only Ghana, bewildered and alone, wondering what it had done. I died in 1972, Bucharest, Romania, a clinic, cancer, 6 years after the coup, in a body that had been running from 1909 and simply ran out of road. I did not die in Accra. I did not die in the house I built, on the soil I served, surrounded by the people I loved. I died in a foreign clinic with a borrowed language and a country that existed on maps but not in my hands. But here is what I need you to hear. And I need you to hear it as if the walls of this room are thin and the world is pressing its ear against them. Africa is not finished. The coup did not finish Africa. They tore down one statue and thought they had buried a continent. You cannot bury a continent. You can only delay it. And delay, as any honest imperialist will tell you in his private moments, delay is all they ever had. Because the truth about Africa is the same truth that cost me my country. We are not small. We are not primitive. We are not available. We are the beginning of the human story, and we will not allow ourselves to be written out of its ending. I was Kwame Nkrumah. I was Ghana. And Ghana is still here.